Michael, thanks for looking into that and taking us through that. That was good stuff. I don't know how many renderings do you say you do in a year that get you a client? Like, how often are you using those tools?
Um, Very seldom. I've
Three,
basically got, well, I'll generally have 7 or 8 times a year that I'll have to do a nice looking render. Um, most of the time they just need line drawings,
right?
and I'll also use artistic renderworks to give white models or something like that, so that people can just look at the physical space and not get bent out of shape if it's the right Pantone color for their logo. Um, a lot of times it's like, is it really worth it? Do the clients really need to see, a final quality, nicely done render? Certainly for some scenic stuff, yes, but I'm not doing a huge amount of set design, so.
Sure. Well, and I found is like, yeah, I might only do, me personally, two, maybe three a year. It's just frequent enough that I need to know how to do it, and infrequent enough I forget how to do it every single time. And I come back and go, there was a thing here that I had to do, and I'm scratching my brain going, what? And the part of the why I'm recording these and probably why I want these is so we all get to know the community of other people doing this, going, hey, the network of the phone or the network of the email, like, hey, Hibbard, we did this, but how do we do it? Do you remember? Or Martin, do you remember how to do it? Oh, yeah, do the XYZ thing. Oh, right. Okay, thank you.
Background setting or something like that.
Yeah, go down two menus and over to the third tab and then click on, and all right. So it's a little bit of knowing who's here, who's doing it, or at least kind of savvy with it. So you've got that, because there's weight between all the consoles, between all the gear, between all the software settings. Like, I can't remember all the details and all the digital toggles of every last stupid thing. And then it changes every year with the software update or a hardware update, or like, okay, this is how it was last year, but now it's different. So knowing who our community of people doing this is, I think, is also super valuable.
Do you guys find yourselves, how do you get, this is a little off the technical side, but I always wonder how other TDs or project managers, how do you bill for all the extra time? Because, it's not too dissimilar from talking about the rendering time that we had with Steve LaRose last week. Like, hey, I'm gonna spend hours, especially with walkthroughs, because that's much more time sensitive. But do you guys find yourselves adding a premium? Because this is obviously a value add beyond just doing, your basic plan views, your 3D elevations, etc.
For me, I've got a couple clients that they'll hire me out just to do the rendering, just to do the drafting. I had one, they called me this year, like January 2nd. They're trying to win a bid before all this craziness happened, but their drafter guy, he was out having a baby, so they needed to just get this bid out quickly. And so the way I deal with that is, if you need pieces back from me within 48 hours, first I start drafting at overtime rate. Anything in the next 48 hours, I'm billing at overtime rate. And for me, I've done several, so I can kind of say, within 10 hours, this is what you'll get. Within 15 hours, this is what you'll get. Within 20 hours, 2 days, you'll get this. It takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to set up my file, to get it and import it from the basic clients, just to get ready to start drawing before I've done any, just to get all the DWG layers put in the right places and have all my stuff imported. It takes me 90 minutes to 2 hours to get that set up sometimes, right? So I kind of tell the client that on the front end, this is kind of what it takes to get me there. I'll do this rendering for you, and within this rendering, you're basically going to get 3 views. Kind of as we were talking last week with Steve, you kind of got that front shot, you got that far wide shot, and then depending on what the project is, Do you need that overhead spiral circle shot like Michael was just talking about? Do you need a backstage entrance kind of shot? You know, the third one's kind of, you know, as you're talking with the client, kind of flexible on what they need. But you give them those, like, here's your basic looks, and I will give them, before I go to the final renders, I'll at least give them the wireframe cameras, or at least OpenGL. This is the direction we're going. Is this the kind of angle that you want? They go, yeah, tweak a little bit. We'll have a little dialogue about that. For me, and you know, that's probably in the 10 to 15 hour place. And I'm sending those to them. All right, this is where we're at. I'm getting ready to send these. Do you like them? And I'll do one kind of with, these are the established lighting looks. You know the directions. You know this is the textures. Are we close? Yes, we're close. Bang, here's your 3 with the full quality, full lighting in those 3 positions. Beyond there, you know, each additional set of renderings is going to be so much, you know, additional time. And I kind of, at the point that I'm sending them out, those first 3, I said, I anticipate, looking at the complexity of this drawing, additional renderings are going to be at, you know, 90 minutes each, or 2 hours each, or you have some, and, you know, estimate high, not so high you blow their budget, but give them an idea, like, this is where we're at, but time and time and time and time again, this is now costing you, this is what it's going to cost you. That's kind of how I handle it.
How much time do you spend? I mean, because one of the big things for me is, you know, figure OpenGL quality is, say, a 6. And, you know, once you start putting in, you know, some nice lights and, you know, texturing all your surfaces and stuff like that, and final quality RenderWorks, you know, that can bring it up to about an 8. I've seen some beautiful architectural stuff done in RenderWorks that is more like a 9. That's almost photorealistic, but I know that the architects spent literally weeks on making it. And then you look at stuff done in Cinema 4D and some of the other things that is photorealistic that I would consider a 10. And then how much time do you spend going from, you know, the 7, for me, going from a 7 to a 9 could mean, you know, doubling the amount of time I spend on it. I mean, when do you decide that, okay, yeah, this is going to be good enough for the client?
In my workflow, I can usually do the wireframe. I got to think through the process, so bear with me. I can usually do the wireframe. Drawing setup is 2 hours. Wireframe and stuff layout is in the next about 4 hours. So about 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours, I basically got I've got close enough drawn. Is it exact production? Probably not. It's at least placeholders for screens and rigging positions that were close enough for rendering, because I figured that the client's trying to, they need a close enough rendering that they sell or buy the product. Is it spot on photorealistic? In my case, no. I'm trying to get them in the room, get used to what they're gonna, you know, is this worth their $2 million or whatever it's gonna be? So I get my wireframe in about 6 hours. Then I start throwing in textures and ambient lights. At that point, probably at about, and I'm starting to do my cameras at about my 9th hour. I'm starting to get the OpenGL. I'm probably at your level 6. I can pump out a rendering or 2, you know, maybe 2 cameras worth at sort of your OpenGL 6 level rating. Push it to 10 hours. I'm finally starting to get a couple of custom RenderWorks with probably chairs are removed. I'm taking some of the details out. You know, let's not have all the chairs. Let's not have all the flowers and centerpieces. You know, doing a rendering with tables pin spotted looks beautiful. It takes forever to load, right? So I'm starting to do, you know, now at this point, okay, you start rendering and you start eliminating some of those details for the moment. Take out the centerpieces. Just have tables, no chairs. You start minimizing it that way. So I'm custom renderworksing in that 9 to 10 hours mark, and making sure I'm getting the layers, the angles laid in. At that point, yeah, it could be another 10 hours to get, lit fog, triple bounce lighting. Do you want a
Yeah.
custom screen,
And
custom
that's
image
one of
on
the things that
screen?
always gets me is like, okay, that's, getting it that last 10% takes, almost 80% of your time.
Yeah.
And that's why I was looking at Cinema 4D, just because the quality of the render is so much better. And, I suspect for my architectural stuff, I'm going to go with Twin Motion just because the quality is so much nicer.
It'd be nice to see what Twin Motion can do in terms of rendering lighting and lighting beams, columns, gobos, lighting texture.
Not great.
Yeah, I was kind of
Doesn't do
that.
gobos, doesn't do, does do lit fog, but it's not going to be ESP Vision or
Right.
anything like that.
So
And
if I can chime in from a sales standpoint, from an entertainment sales standpoint, I just leave it up to the client. I start saying, well, what do you want? Do you want a basic floor plan? That's a day rate.
sure.
If you want a simple rendering of this floor plan, I'm going to go high and I'm going to say it's another day rate, because if as soon as you do one simple rendering, they're going to want to make changes. So that's an automatic day rate right there, and I already have 1 or 2 built-in changes in that rate. If they want a final rendering where we're going to go into this photorealism, which I usually try to discourage at that point, because you can usually get a representation of simple rendering. Because that's what this is about. This is about making the sale, as opposed to having a hyper photorealistic thing. You kind of hope that your clients have a little bit more of a vision or creative mind. They can say, well, it's going to be this, I can add some textures in here. What the floor of the ballroom is going to be. I can have a simple representation of that by taking a picture of it, putting it on the slab. If you want photorealism, I'd make it 4 day rates.
Yeah.
Just because you can kind of lay it out for them where they want to go and how much they need to see it, or how much you could just describe it, because you can use the rendering as sort of an inspiration for, more conversation with the client, rather than boom, here's a picture of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, the trouble I'm finding is, a lot of clients are so used to the graphics that they can get with their video companies, the guys that are building the custom animations and all the other stuff, they're expecting that level of polish of a Pixar movie, that they can get from their graphics house. And it's just like, well, why doesn't, our scenery look like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very real thing.
Yeah, which is why I think Cinema 4D is what I find a lot of people are using to go there. For me, though, it comes down to the point of trying to not have to do a real, honest to God, physical 3D model, and trying to sell the show. I often will get to the Vectorworks rendering, a rough one, with a director, and then it's a question for producers is to sell this design, do I need to go the next level? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. But it depends on, I sometimes will do a set that's a simple drawing and everyone loves it and you're like, great, don't need to go on. If it's a hard sell and I'm worried about it, I got to spend the extra time. For me, it's always trying to avoid building that actual 3D model, in which case, you're billing for that if you have to build the model. But in theater, sometimes I get
But if you build that model, the way you're starting it, you're already getting it all laid out for production further down the line. So I mean, that's well invested. It's where do you draw the line where it becomes pretty rather than now it's practical? Where do you go beyond practicality?
It's the lighting it. It's where do you draw the line is whether you go in and light it. Because you can do an OpenGL with no lighting and even do a Final Renderworks with no lighting. It's when you start coming in and lighting it and making the scenes. I think it's a question of, it's got to be case by case and whether or not you need it to sell the job.
Do you guys ever find, I try to keep things high level sometimes, right? Have you ever done a rendering and then the client, and you spend all the time putting the graphics on the screen, and then they hone in on some obscure detail in the corner of the room? Maybe there's a chair that you, is that chair going to be there? And it's like, no, it's not going to.
Every time you're like, oh, look at this beautiful thing. Oh, but
Yeah.
you know what? That drape over there, God, I just, ugh.
Exactly. Like, we can
Every
change the
time.
drape. Yeah. So that's the problem with getting too specific with renderings. You got to keep it open-ended a little bit, because then it's just, yeah, they hone in on the wrong things.
You know, I've used the sketch mode on Vectorworks sometimes to send that first drawing. I actually, you know, I could send it out in OpenGL or Final RenderWorks, but I actually use the sketch mode to send it out because it's
That's a great
more vague.
idea.
And they don't even know that I didn't just sketch it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work with a scenic designer, Rick Goodwin, who used to do all of his initial sketches in Pantone markers. And, you know, it made a really beautiful, loose feeling. And, you know, I've found I could do something similar to that with the artistic RenderWorks and making it look like, you know, a marker. You know, that way it's really loose, and, you know, your client's not fussing over, you know, is it the right, you know, exact right flag you've got in the background.
I appreciate Andy's comment on that, and it's, you know, when coaching and when I've taught some rendering, when Steve LaRose, I love his work when he was working last week, but he'd done a bunch and he showed them to me, and I said, they're great, I don't like them. And I basically, and once he got really good, I said, okay, now make it not as good. And he kind of looked at me like, what? I said, I don't want it photorealistic. Make not errors, but build in the inaccuracies into it, so that we build in that softness, build in that sketch feeling, so that the client sees where you're going, but it's still a watercolor. It is not a photo. And then at the beginning of the process, that's one thing is I've got a couple of renderings that I like that have served me well, and I send those out. I showed that the last time, that 2013. Like, this is the quality of rendering I'm going to give. You know, when I'm talking to the client, this is where I will get to if you want to go this far.
And how often do we as designers get locked into that picture that they want? Because then as soon as you get on site, you know, that you had this beautiful, amazing, picturesque rendering that they sent, and that's all they want. Where you're like, no, this is a springboard for us. This is a canvas for us to start playing with. And they're like, no. That's what was sold. So
Yeah.
The special ones where you've got the 50-foot ceiling, and you know, there's no lighting and no truss and no speakers, and it looks gorgeous.
I mean, I do think it is.
The lights go right through the speakers. There's none there. It's great.
I do think it is important in the sense to at least have some of that, even if it's not exactly accurate, to at least help put that garbage in, that clutter in, if you will, just so they can remind, oh, that's right. There, you know, as Steve was pointing out, there is going to be a ceiling here. There are going to be these other objects, hotel chandeliers. Whether it is the hotel chandelier or not, it is a hotel chandelier, which is probably not going to look exactly like the rest of their artistic vision. And they go, oh, that's right. We've got this, you know, this ugly hotel chandelier that we have to deal with. Yes, you do. Can't fix it, so let's work around it. But then they're like, where did that come from? Because they I don't know about your clients, but a lot of my, when I'm dealing with the end direct clients, their mental imaging vision mind is not as practiced as ours is.
One of the things you can try is using is overlaying Vectorworks viewports with different render modes. So you have a sketch for the outsides, and maybe only half of it or a portion of your rendering is done in the final rendering, so that you overlay the two, crop the whatever's on top back, and you can get that. You'll see a lot of people doing that it has a sketch feel to parts of it, and then maybe just the stage bit is rendered out. It helps sometimes with them not looking at some of the extraneous stuff.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a great way
That's
to
a great idea. I've
know,
never
cover up
seen
the
that.
venue.
I don't think I've seen that done. Paul, do you have an example of
I
that?
was gonna say, do you have something to show that? I'd love to see what that looks like.
That's a great idea because what do every client want? They want to focus in on the presentation, but if you keep everything soft and rough, that stuff is, you can kind of tell them to not ignore the stuff, you know, much like what Andrew was saying, like, you know, they're focusing on these little things. If you make it rough and bring it into where they need to focus, I really like that. That's a really smart idea.
I've actually done that before. I've taken the rendering as best you can, and you kick it out, and then I've gone into Vectorworks and I've inverted the colors so it gives me a black background. Now my black lines are white, and I've kicked the wireframe out with white lines, and then I've gone into either Acorn or Photoshop, laid them over, and then just took the eraser and erased one of the layers and revealed it that way. But similar process, you know, same concept.
So has anybody done a Vectorworks viewport that's a donut? I don't know if you
Circle,
can.
yeah, you just use the circle as a crop versus a rectangle. Is that what
Well,
mean?
you could no,
Yeah.
but then you have to have a secondary shape that would punch the hole.
So I've done this. I don't know if that is that showing up.
Yeah, I'm seeing
It's
that.
showing up look good.
So I did that as a cover page for Smoky Joe's that I'm working on. So this was the cover page for the rendering pack. And so I did the circle sketch, and then I put the Smoky Joe's. Then I put Smoky Joe's on top, and then the outside is the final RenderWorks. So that was just an example. Now a lot of times I'd flip that where the center is the good part and the outside's
So
not.
Paul, how did you, in terms of your sheet view, how did you stack your layers? You got one viewport that is the full scenic.
And then another viewport that is, I used for the crop, I used the oval to make the crop.
Right.
I just laid them on top of each other.
And the oval is laid on top. That's layer 2. And then the Smoky Joe's is highlighted again as a third on top.
Right. And I just went through and, and cropped that out. So but yeah, you just use the oval, and in your viewport, you just have two viewports on your sheet layer laid on top of each other.
Right.
One with one crop and one with the other crop. And I just lined them up to make sure that it all lines up.
Clever. Nice.
Yeah, very clever.
Yeah, I'm definitely stealing that. That is a really great trick.
Thanks.
Oh, there goes all Paul Black's business.
Oh no.
Have any of you guys used the camera matching?
Michael, say that again. I coughed. I didn't hear you.
Has anyone used camera matching?
No.
I played with it for a little bit, but I never really got.
Yeah, I mean, I've played with it and, went through the demos and stuff like that. It definitely looks, for some architectural stuff, could be really nice. Also seems to be a huge pain in the butt.
As most of the good Vectorworks stuff is.
No, they have have you guys used it? Don't they have a service where you take a photo, like a high level photo of something, you kick it to Vectorworks and they'll convert it. They'll like 3D it based on what they can detect on the photo too.
Yeah, I tried it, and it's hard to do well. And what they convert it to is a wire mesh object. So you really can't manipulate what they did. I took the photos of a theater though to try and create the 3D theater. It was a very complicated old, Victorian theater, and it kind of worked, but you can't do anything with the object because it's this wire mesh thing.
That's a bummer.
But I think it would work, like if you had a car and you took the photos of an object, you could probably get that to work.
I've seen some people doing the point cloud conversion stuff and using that for some spaces. Seems to work relatively well in certain instances. But again, you end up spending a lot of time on it.
What is that? I don't know what that point cloud is.
You know, laser scanners or something like that, where it's going to be taking dimensions and basically, you know, getting a whole bunch of points in a space. So you end up with, you know, 10 million points, and then you can then bring it in, and you can actually do that in Vectorworks. You can bring in a point cloud object and, you know, work around it. And then, you know, depending on how well it works, sometimes you can do it where it'll define planes and stuff like that. So you can, you know, do a as-built scan of a space and then build and get a vector model from it. Again, you know, depends entirely on how much time and effort you want to put into it.
Sorry, I'm getting a chat, so I got a couple links and I'm following up on stuff here. Jeff just sent a link to. I'll see if I can't.
I can share my screen if you want.
Jeff, can you? Why don't you hold that
sure.
thought? We're gonna jump.
Okay.
Sessions. Chris, you're gonna say goodbye. Good to see you, dude.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I gotta jump to making dinner for the family here.
Yeah,
So.
okay. Call you out.
You guys.
Yeah, Jeff. We'll have you share that in this next one.